The question which I felt like everyone asked is, does ILSs work? Do they work? Do you get the rankings that you're promised? And what is the impact? We did say 1.7 million. And so it really wasn't a challenging conversation except for the build to rent assets. So the more, the ones that are more urban and just wasn't getting a lot of traffic in general and people thought were homes like the SFR, we did find those to be, they did suffer a bit. There was a blip for them.
Relating this back to our clients, because we do have a lot of conversations with our clients who do know marketing. They're in the marketing space, but there is still some hesitations around that behavior. I think what you said about owners applies to the marketing team as well, meaning like it's so ingrained. They've been spending on ILSs for so long. And so how do we overcome that objection? I think we've been able to do that through data.
Okay, welcome to the Digible Dude podcast this week. Reed's on vacation. Local vacation, staycation. So I'm here with
Nicole Daly.
What do you do?
I'm one of the co-founders here at Digible, but I lead the overall experience for our employees, clients, and partners.
All right. And?
Careena and Daly, and I am the client service director.
All right, cool. So you guys are going to gang up on me.
Yes.
That's the plan.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. Well, today we're here to talk about ILS Independence as you framed it, Careena. So why don't you give us your I guess your background on this, what is ILS Independence, and we'll go from there.
My experience in that. So my background is definitely digital marketing. I was in the digital marketing world. I don't know where to look. Do I look at you? Sorry. Okay.
Just at me.
Perfect. Was in automotive. So I did automotive for 11 years. Very, very volatile industry. Never knew what I was walking into. Didn't have a lot of like data to help us really understand that marketing world. And then I moved over to multifamily at Mark Taylor, which is a property management company in Arizona. At the time when I came, they had like 69 to 75 properties, and I started in the marketing department with them. And my very first task, and almost my very first day, I think, Dustin, the VP of marketing at the time, was like, hey, we're rolling out ILS Independence, and this is your job and what you're doing, and here's like some bullet points, and take it away. And I did, and it was a lot, but challenging, but really awesome. So it just kind of propelled from there, and what happened and all the learnings from that really helped shape my career with Mark Taylor specifically, and just all that knowledge.
Well, Nicole, you had a question about...
Yeah, before I get to that, what we were talking about, I guess pre-show, if you call it, is just probably the benefits that you had kind of going into that without a ton of context.
Exactly.
But especially coming from working with automotive clients, I also worked at automotive clients in the past, and they're really tough, like
they
tough,
are so
tough cookies.
tough.
And so how do you feel like that clientele and your experience shaped your ability to kind of handle what I assume to be really tough conversations rolling out ILS Independence without having the context of the industry?
I think it was perfect that I had no context, because I was just intro to all these clients. It was the ownership groups, because Mark Taylor ownership group did whatever we said. So there was about like 17 properties that we were able to just like pull the trigger, no problem. But it was the rest of them that I had to jump on all these calls. And I was definitely like bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, like, hi, I'm Careena. How's it going? Great news. We're going off ILSs. And they're like, what? Excuse me?
They're like, first of all, who are you? Second of all.
And it was interesting. The first few calls, I started to very quickly realize, oh, this is a challenge. This is not something that people are excited about. They're nervous. So I had to quickly create like a talk track around just the questions that I was getting asked, and just preemptively be like, okay, I know you're concerned about this, but here's our process. And I do think just having that volatileness of automotive, I was just able to be quick on my feet, of just like very positive. Everything's great. We know it's going to work. And we did, because they had kind of done it a little bit on some of those Mark Taylor owned properties. So there was a little bit of data to show that it'd work, but they were all just a specific type of garden style versus like, does it work on mid-rise? Does it work on SFR? What about senior? You know, it wasn't totally well known, like, does this work on everything? So there was aspects of it that I didn't totally know, and I didn't have information, but I did have a good plan, and that felt good. So
that's awesome. Well, what do you think it was the main like catalyst for Mark Taylor making that decision? Because it was ahead of the curve, like ahead of
like
time.
4 or
So
5
we're still
years ago.
talking, to clients today about the impacts of moving budget from ILS to direct marketing. So was it budgeting that, was one of their main concerns, or what do you think was the catalyst for making that decision?
It was definitely budgeting, and really the question, which I felt like everyone asked, is does ILSs work? Do they work? Do you get the rankings that you're promised? And what is the impact? And we were starting to build out a CRM at the time. We were finally able to get some data to show what the cost per lead and the cost per lease was on the ILSs versus just your regular websites. Or I had brought social with me. I brought social and I brought geofencing because they didn't have any of that at the time. So I was able to kind of bring in some things that kind of helped ease some of the pain of moving off of something but feeling like, well, then what am I doing? So I was able to be like, okay, but we're going to start doing some paid Facebook ads for you, and we're going to start doing geofencing. And that definitely was like, geofencing had been out for a while, but they were just blown away. This is new and incredible. But I think the biggest thing that helped is we rolled out websites for them. So the big brainchild of it is that you had your property management website, and on that website you would have your property within its own page. But what we were rolling out was just a very separate one outside of the Mark Taylor one that was just your branding, your name, and the hopes was that we would do enough paid and SEO on that you would show up on the first page versus needing to have the ILS to get you up to that first page. And so you would get to put the money back in yourself versus necessarily like an ILS and giving them the additional funds to help boost their companies versus your own. And so that was definitely positive, kind of challenging to explain at times because we were asking them to spend money while it was less money. They were still getting a savings, but it was just, I was changing some things for another.
Totally.
So there was some challenges there in explaining that. And why do I need 2 websites and all of that?
Probably really stressful, like the timing of it all to hit at the same time, but also I think very strategic and thoughtful to break out the property to have its own brand, have its own experience. We were talking about this on the drive-in, just regional sites in general and our experience with that. So that's actually a little bit opposite, I think, of what you were thinking in terms of driving traffic from the ILSs and replacing that with a regional site. So I'll tee you up to see if...
Yeah, so you guys were previously on like one website, it sounds like. Now you broke off to separate websites and killed ILS at the same time.
Yeah.
It is kind of the opposite of what we see from other folks. Other folks are typically on a bunch of independent websites and then kill those, they think, for the savings, and then consider moving off the ILS because they're making a mini ILS. Exactly. Is the way they think about it. And
we already had that with Mark Taylor, and they were definitely, that's how they invested into that. And there was definitely some pushback there, to be honest, as well, because they felt like sometimes they were investing money in Mark Taylor's name. And so I think that I think I maybe had it easier because they were already paying for this, that I was like, and now you get your own. And I think that conversation was quite smoother than expected, but there was definitely like that nail biter that first few weeks of when we shut everything off, and we did just shut everything off at once. I mean, it was all of them. And it was like, is traffic going to just completely flatten today? Is it today? And it didn't.
No, did you see any blip?
Nope.
Did you guys get to keep the free listings, do you know?
We actually scraped all of those off.
Wow.
Because it was misinformation, a lot of them too. It wasn't connecting. That was a lot of the problem, is we had also rolled out like having the property managers have to do marketing assessments every day of their website, like their like internet portfolio essentially, where they'd go in and like Google themselves, look at their GBP and like put in a test lead. And we were finding that there was so much just inaccurate information out there that was actually quite challenging, that we ended up scraping all of that off and just having things that we knew that we managed so the information was correct.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were talking through that, like it makes so much sense to me, like that you guys would do it all at once, where it's like, okay, we're ripping down ILS, we're building out property websites, we're also launching paid social, geofencing, driving direct traffic to those individual sites, which is more cost effective than probably the sponsorship package that you're paying, for the ILSs directly. And so while there's a lot going on there, I think that is huge in terms of like not seeing that fall off in traffic, leads, and being able to like replace that in their mind main source and driver of traffic to the website. Yeah. And
I think that is what helped. I mean, we didn't really skip a beat there. We did end up saving 1.7 million that year, I think, from going off ILSs.
That's what we're going to save if we stop ordering LaCroix here at the office.
1.7 million, probably, actually.
How much LaCroix are you drinking?
Not me. I was limited.
He has the Dr. Pepper out today.
I know, that Dr. Pepper.
Well, you have a secret stash, I think, in the fridge.
Yeah, well, Michelle helps me with that. Go ahead, Careena.
Oh, I don't remember. What
You saved 1.7 million.
We did save 1.7 million. And so it really wasn't a challenging conversation except for the build to rent assets. So the more, the ones that are more urban and just wasn't getting a lot of traffic in general and people thought were homes, like the SFR, we did find those to be, they did suffer a bit. There was a blip for them. And we did end up turning back on Zillow.
Okay.
Because people were searching on Zillow anyways because they thought that there were homes for rent. And so that did seem to kind of help tide that over. But that I will be very transparent, like that there was definitely a dip for those specific assets for sure. And I don't know if it was necessarily like location, they were just harder to get in general and we needed to spend more money in other ways, or if it was because of just the type of asset that they were.
Yeah, so you're saying the single family rentals are what suffer. Not surprised. I mean, my anecdotal evidence is people don't think to go to apartments.com for a house, but they think about going maybe to Zillow.
And that's the one we turned on. I mean, it did immediately help for sure. And we saw that kind of shift there. So we just added that additional budget. We did keep apartment lists though. And the thought process there was that it's pay to play. So at the time we paid $319 per lease. I think we had enterprise pricing, but, versus having to pay additional costs, this was like an easy one that you'd also still get on like the first page too.
So you mentioned the CRM rollout was also important at this time.
Yes.
And that you guys had some bad attribution before. Could you speak a little bit to that?
We didn't have attribution.
Oh, okay.
So when I started, I was creating Excel spreadsheets from Google, trying to do my own like matching. We had some type of CRM through the PMS, but it wasn't very robust. And so it was very clear we needed something to help with, last touch attribution is the one that we went off of specifically. And so we did have a CRM created, and we started that aspect and that rollout initially. And then we did those 17 properties that were the Mark Taylor owned as like the tester. And then it was pretty quickly after that, I would say in the next 3 months, that we did end up. I will say seasonality is also important. We did it in October. So going into that slower season where we already knew that traffic was going to go kind of light and not mess up anything going into the seasons where we want to keep that momentum going, I do think kind of ease some pain. There was also stress too of like, it's already light and now you're taking away more. Yeah. But that seemed to be an easier story to tell than if I ripped that Band-Aid off in like May. I think there would have been a lot more stress there. So
what was the biggest battle you had to fight then with these owners when you're trying to convince them?
They just don't understand marketing. And so when they've been told one thing for so long that this is something that works and we're coming and saying, hey, this might be, we can try something different. Just kind of having to re-educate and relearn when I didn't totally know all the aspects either, was challenging. And then also truly the website rollout was challenging and their thought, this is my website now. So they wanted it to look very different than necessarily the templates we had. And so there was a lot of resistance there at times. But I do think having the other channels like Facebook and Geo, and we also rolled out more of an email campaign that was far more successful than what we had before. I think that did kind of like, you could feel them immediately start to like simmer. But there was definitely some major pushback. There were some that wanted to wait till the end. They wanted to be in the last phase, make sure that they're not the ones, getting screwed essentially.
Yeah,
so,
totally. If you had no attribution before, as you moved to this, was it more of just you guys were tracking tours before? Is that how you measured there wasn't a blip? When you said there wasn't an impact that you really noticed?
Yeah, that's a fair question. Yeah. I mean, we still had the PMS data in terms of like what was coming through. It just wasn't very easy to pull information from that and share, I feel like. And so that's why the CRM really helped with that. But we did have information and data from many years that we were able to put together we did like year over year data to show seasonality as well of like, did we see anything? But also we did this right before COVID. It was in 2019, I believe. And so it was just when COVID was kind of starting. And so we had closed our doors. So it was kind of a unique time anyways, too, because everything kind of started, the tides kind of changed. And maybe that also helped too, is that COVID happened. And then everything kind of switched towards that. And people kind of forgot about what we had just done 6 months ago. So that might have helped too.
So if you're going to do this, wait for the next pandemic.
Wait till the next pandemic.
And then time it.
It'll ease all the pain.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Nicole, I'll let you ask some more questions before I get to like what happened a year later.
Well, I was just thinking you hit on it with the biggest owner behavior, but relating this back to our clients, because we do have a lot of conversations with our clients who do know marketing. They're in the marketing space, but there is still some hesitations around that behavior. I think what you said about owners applies to the marketing team as well, meaning like it's so ingrained. They've been spending on ILSs for so long. And so how do we overcome that objection? I think we've been able to do that through data. Also, with working with a company like us or other agencies that you have flexibility, I think that has been for us one of the ways to like kind of open that door to that conversation of do you believe in the concept of a flexible marketing budget?
Yes.
So you're not setting and forgetting it. You're changing it based on seasonality, based on occupancy, based on leasing velocity and what's happening in the market. And once you kind of get that buy-in, then it's really hard for some of the the contracts that are in place with ILSs to really make sense for our marketers and our owners. And so we usually try to start by saying like, just try it. Pull back on a package. Go from, top tier to mid tier.
Totally.
And so I'm just curious on any of those other owner objections that you can see like still coming up today for you. I know you've had a lot of conversations with our clients around ILS Independence as well, that either still hold true or that we're having to kind of shift and do some more like re-education around the whole concept.
I definitely think you hit it on the head too with the contracts. Like usually those contracts are a year. We would be able to fight for 6 months for some of them. But it was because we were like enterprise pricing and things like that. So
you have to negotiate.
You have to negotiate. It's not easy, and you had to do it by property. And it wasn't like as a whole we could get 6 months contracts. No, it was by property. And there was a lot of challenges there because I do think that there's value in ILSs, specifically at like lease ups and things like that. When you have the budget, you have the funding. Let's get your name out there. And so I would think that there'd be a lot of value in that first 3 to 6 months to have some type of additional ILS spending, but you can't really get those contracts. You can't get that month to month. You can't get that where you shut it off. And so at the time, it was just kind of like, well, let's put our money back into your property in your name. And so that definitely was something that resonated with ownership groups for sure. And there's a lot of frustrations around contracts, definitely. And so I do think that was easier because also the website contract was month to month. And so there was a lot of flexibility there. And I think that was definitely easing some of that like frustration as well. I'm glad you reminded me of that. Yeah.
Well, do you want to speak at all about like some of the partners we have in the space that are kind of trying to break the mold when it comes to contracts and flexibility and volume and pricing breaks?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've been working with Brinson Group, if that's what you're referencing, and a lot of their goal is let's go ahead and get you on an agreement where you can adjust things every 3 months, and so they've been able to work that out where you don't get to flex every month, but you can at least, instead of having 12-month terms, you can have 3-month terms. And I love that proposition. I think that's awesome. It's amazing. And so then to your point, Careena, you could start with a lease up and maybe after 6 months review it and say, okay, how are we doing? Right. Oh, okay, we need another 3 months. Do another 3 months, and then you may say like, hey, we're leased up and none of our rent roll hits for another 3. So let's go ahead and pull in Q4 until like rent roll is gonna come back around, and then you can decide. Be
strategic about it. I think that would be very, very cool and very interesting.
Yeah. Yes. Was there a point after this or during this first year, let's say the first like 12 months after the switch, where there was some high-fiving from those owners where they're like, oh my gosh, like I was nervous about this, but Or did that never happen?
And it was honestly with the toughest ones. And they were the ones I built the best relationships with because I did spend the most amount of time with them. One, I'm trying to build my own relationship with them, first of all. And then second, I'm trying to ease their pain. And I do very much remember one of the first websites we did, I'll say the name is Emerson. It's a mid-rise in downtown Tempe, which Tempe is a very interesting market if you're not familiar with it. But it's student populated, but all of ours were not student. So there's just this own little ecosystem there. And that was the first website we had ever created outside of the Mark Taylor ones. And it was the highest performing website. And I wonder if I checked today if it still is, but it was just so successful. And we just tried to continue to replicate that because that was like the success. And I remember getting to like go and tell their regional about it, and they were just so thrilled to be the number one website. And I showed that I had all the data. It's definitely data. Like data speaks volumes. And obviously some of the owners are more data driven. Some are more emotional. I say this all the time. Like there's the emotional owners. It's their own money, and they do care about data, but they actually, it's not all to them. It's just very an emotional reaction to them. But more of like the regional side is definitely just data. Make me look good so I can go tell my boss that this was a good idea. And so that was fantastic to just see like it was actually working, to be able to be like, here's this data, but also to have the humility to be like, hey, it's not working at your property as we expected. We are happy to turn back on ILSs. Here's the one we recommend. Here's why. And I do think that helped with some of the tougher ones too, because it did take a minute, I think, for us to put on that humility hat, because it was so successful across so many that once we realized, oh, it seems to just be this certain like subset that it's actually not being successful with. And some of those ownership groups were some of the tougher ones. So I do think that it's just hard when you're like, okay, maybe we were wrong a little bit here. And I do think once we came and we're like, hey, here's what we see. We do think that you should go back on Zillow, and here's why. And I do think that helped all of that. After that, smooth sailing. No other conversations.
Well, and I'm sure like you handle these types of conversations well. So that conversation could sound like, hey, we took a chance here. It worked out for 9 out of 10. You were one of the 10 it didn't work for, but I know you appreciate us taking chances like this, because when we do this in other areas, you're not going to be the one that doesn't work out. It's going to work out. So
totally,
they always appreciate experimentation.
They appreciate it. They just value the transparency, honestly, and they want to save money very badly. They want that number to look good, especially those that are getting ready to sell, which is most of them. And so, in the end, it was a very successful rollout. I would for sure, by far. But I would say the first 6 months was quite challenging. Lots of conversations, lots of ad hoc calls, easing anxiety, giving talk tracks for them to give to the owner, or whatever it was needed. So I did feel like there was a lot of additional manpower spent in those first 6 months, but I do think it was worth it in the end. And it's something that I do think Mark Taylor gets to have a gold star for, that they were some of the first ones to take that chance.
Yeah, some of the feedback we've gotten from others when we talk about this strategy is like, I'm so nervous that if I do this, that I'm going to get the ILS is going to take retribution on me, or when I come back to them.
Yeah.
Like they're going to really come back, and then they're going to put the screws down.
Did not find that to be the case at all.
Talk more about that.
Not at all. No. Nope. They were still coming by the property, still talk. They're the reps have been our friends for, I wasn't in the industry as much as they had been, but even still, I had many lunches and many meetings with them. I was friends with my reps. And so truthfully, the day we had to tell all of our reps that this was happening was a very difficult day. The president of apartments.com flew out to Mark Taylor.
Wow.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but that did happen. And he spent the whole day with us to talk to us about it. He had told us he was hiring Jeff Goldblum and putting all this money, and that was before all that had happened. And so there was just like a lot around this and a lot of anxiety. And I'm going to tell you right now, I left Mark Taylor 9 months ago, and I still had reps knocking on our doors, talking to us, still the same, still love us, still come and talk to the managers. The managers are, there's a love-hate relationship there for sure, but I found there to be maybe a little bit of like animosity at the beginning and maybe hoping it failed, which I can understand. But when it didn't, and when we did come back with some properties for some ILSs, I think that they realized that there was going to be some mutual relationship there moving forward, and it was something we needed to try. We needed to see if it was successful or not. We certainly don't spend at all nearly any amount of money that Mark Taylor necessarily was at the time, but I think it was helpful that there was a couple that we did kind of like go back to.
Where do you think that fear is originating from, David?
That's what they're being told. Like the reps often say, like, you have this deal now. If you leave, you're going to have to go back to sticker.
They want you to come back. They will give you the deal.
Yeah.
They gave us we still got enterprise deals after that. Again, I don't know if am I allowed to say that, but
yeah, I've heard that from a lot of folks too. Yeah. So it's just the fear of like, what if, and then if you're the marketer that makes the choice, you just worry about like having egg on your face.
Totally.
Reed always says you never got fired for buying apartments.com. And so it's more of like, it feels more risky to them to take the chance. Yeah. And then if they try to come back and rates go up 10%, it's like, well, this was your call. Why did you do this?
Yeah.
So
I didn't have any of those issues.
Yeah. I'd also say, like, if you did leave and let's say you're gone for a quarter, so like 25% of the year, and then you come back, and even if they raised rates 10%, you're still out ahead. And when you come up to your renegotiation next year, they're not going to they're not going to raise rates on you 25%. They're going to come back and be like, well, let's keep you this year so you don't do it again. So how do we give you the enterprise where you get the 25% discount?
Exactly. They want to keep you. Yeah. And they'll do what they need to do.
Yeah. So what about if you were to go back in time and talk to yourself at the beginning of this project, what advice would you give?
Oh, that's a really good question. I was also just so much younger, which seems silly because I was...
So moisturize.
Yeah.
Sunscreen.
Calm down. Work is not life. I think what I would tell myself is that it is in fact going to be okay, and that you are not going to lose your job if this doesn't work. I had a lot of stress around that. I had a lot of stress that, not that anyone necessarily was like saying this to me, but I had to also, so we've been talking mostly about the external people I had to talk to, but I had internal people I had to speak to, all the managing directors I had to talk to who are managing these assets and are financially responsible for these assets that were coming to me with stress and anxiety around it. And so I had to deal with those stakeholders. And I think that I had a lot more stress, to be honest with you, around the internal ones. The external felt like very natural to me. That's what I had done in automotive. Internal felt more personal and more like they could just come to my desk and just be like, Careena, tell me truthfully, is this going to work? And I'm like, oh man.
Yeah. Well, you were also like, if I believe, Dustin's first hire on the marketing team, right? And so they're not used to working internally with the marketing team. Of course, they're probably used to going directly to Dustin. And then I think you guys built up the team to like 12 people maybe. And so that's a lot of internal change management and behavior that you're overcoming as well, being new, not only with this massive undertaking.
And it was just me that whole time. We didn't hire those 12 people until a year in. And so I was the person. And Dustin was in his technology world, which was fantastic. He was building CRM and building all this stuff. And so it really was on my shoulders.
It was really, here you go.
No, it really was. Welcome, and he didn't join one single call. Like I talked to him about this now. I'm like, why didn't you just make sure I was saying the right thing? And he was like, I knew you got him. Like, but did I? Like, you didn't join one call. And so I just go back to myself and just, honestly, I would say this to any stage of Careena's life, is to just chill out. It's fine. Because I put additional stressors on myself that I didn't actually need. Because if it didn't work, it was okay that we just went back and got on them. And that was okay. But there was this like pressure internally because I wanted so badly to be like, look at this thing that I helped accomplish. Right. And it was so successful. And it is also still successful, even if it didn't work on all of them. And so I just don't know that I had the maturity at the time to like understand that was okay.
So. And really hard to sell through. I mean, you talked about this on a different podcast about like
you listen to the podcast,
your failures. Maybe I was on that one. Celebrating the failures and like really trying to kind of change the mindset for the team to know like it's okay to fail. Yes. But that's super hard.
So hard
to look at that and
I'm brand new at this company and this is like the thing. And I'll be honest, at the time the senior leadership there was like mixed reviews on if this was going to work. And so I did hear feedback from some of the senior leadership that this wouldn't work. And I didn't feel like I knew enough about the industry at the time to like fully grasp, because there was some strong reactions across the board about it. And so there was just a lot of feelings.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned building out the team to 12 afterwards. So is that how you guys reinvested a lot of the savings was into this team? I'm wondering if it ends up, if you would think now that it ended up evening out, or if there was still an increase in performance afterwards with hiring that headcount.
I think there was a lot of savings for I would say the first 2 years. And then as the team did like build to what it was, it just evolved into something different. They got more hands-on service because it was just me at the time. And so I didn't have like monthly calls. I didn't have reporting. I didn't have anything. It would just be like ad hoc as needed. And it was only when something bad was happening. And so what a wonderful way to always talk to people is when something bad is happening. And so as we started to build out like a true process at the time, because we did build that out, there's triggers of long-term net is the term that we use, which is the 60-day view minus notices versus like real-time occupancy. And so there's triggers of like 90 to 93, you would do these things. And so we built out this like really wonderful process that I do think was part of the savings from that. We were able to actually build out the structure, have reporting calls, like have like true marketers have pay attention to you. And I think that tremendously helped. Because they were asking for these things and I just physically could not give it to them.
Yeah, so it's almost like maybe you realize the savings at first, then you build up the team and it becomes net neutral, but then the team is able to be proactive, which then brings up like the operational savings and efficiency moving forward. Also, we all know, as you were saying, owners, a lot of times it's their own money, and so they want to know that you've got eyes on. And
at all
so,
times. What are you doing?
Yeah,
What optimizations are you making?
And also helps you guys pitching new owners because now you have capacity to pull together a pitch. If you're trying to like put out 65 fires from the current property and go pitch a new owner, there's no capacity there. So I'm just showing how that change management could have a rolling impact.
I'll also say it was a really great thing for us to kind of tout for Mark Taylor when they're going for new business is that we were ILS independent. And so doing underwriting and things like that, our underwriting did look very different than other property management companies trying to pitch for new accounts because the marketing budget is always the one that gets just redlined and is always done improperly, to be honest, in underwriting. And so to have it not have ILSs in it and be like less expensive was definitely something I think helped too.
Did that mean that you guys ever, when you're doing the budgets, have to build in extra because your budget would be less, and then if you ever have to course correct, it's like you have to go ask for more. So did you guys almost have like a buffer built in?
No, there was we would just reforecast it mid-year if it ended up changing. But once we've really kind of fine-tuned it and figured out what worked and what didn't, we would just have we would have the levers in by season and when we would anticipate doing it. So there really wasn't a buffer there. If anything, it was maybe in a PPC spend. We might have some that we could work with because we didn't use it all that month or whatnot.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I was thinking more about like folks listening to this, if they're thinking about changing their ILS spend or, pulling off of ILSs completely, like what 3 to 5 pieces of advice would you give to them?
Do it. No, I'm serious. Do it. Try it. Don't, because I have talked to some clients since being here even, and, they want to do it so badly, but there's just that fear. And so they just go down to the lower package, and that's just not the same thing. It's not doing it. But I would say, maybe do a phased approach. If you have a portfolio of 20, maybe do it with 5 and see how those go. Make sure that they're in regions that are already very successful. And I would be very intentional with which ownership groups I did it with. I would be very intentional with when I did it. But I would definitely try it. I don't think that there's harm in it because you can always go back.
Yeah.
Why do you say don't go to the lower package and just cancel altogether?
I did not find that going to the lower package did anything different than so this was the challenges, and this is my own personal opinion, but I did not find that there was a lot of variation in the packages and what we were receiving and what we saw coming through when we did have the packages in different levels, and that going to the lower level just means that you're even further mixed with your competitors. Like this is just a page full of competitors. And so I found that unless you had something that stood out astronomically, like, are you 12 weeks free? Like, what is the reason why they're coming to you versus someone else? I did not think that there was any ROI on going any lower. I think you stay where you are, or you just come right off of it.
See, what I was thinking is if you can't convince your folks to go all the way off, you might as well pull all the way down. And then, and I say down to a gold, because the gold, between gold, platinum, diamond, it's kind of the same thing.
Sure.
And so then at least you're getting some savings.
Sure.
But I also, here in my head, if you can get people to go and you want to make a bold move, then just cut it and then come back. Because as you said, you still see there's value in it. I believe there's value in the ILSs as well. But when I think about like organizations that go through staff reductions, that the advice is always cut once, cut deep. And so taking that same advice here for like your packages, like just cut once and cut all the way, and then layer back on.
Yeah, exactly right.
Right, because then you'll be way more like choosy as you bring folks back on. Just that's how it does with staff. Is like you don't like when I was at Verizon, I think in 2 years I went through 6 rounds of layoffs, and I was like, this is just unreal. I cannot believe like it's like you should just cut all of us at once.
Just call it a day.
Well, I survived is the problem. I kept asking to be let go, and they wouldn't let me go. I'm like, please. But anyways, it would have been better for the staff because mentally they were just getting destroyed.
Right.
And so anyways, when taking that analogy over here is like cut once, cut deep, and then you'll be very strategic as you start to layer back on.
You'll have so much more learnings if you do that too, versus if you just cut back a package. You don't actually really know.
It's noisy.
It's what a great word. It is very noisy. So if you just cut that back, you'll have so much more clarity as to like what was working and where was it working, and then you can just rebuild and relayer from there. And so my number one, I would just do it.
Sweet. Well, last thing I have, and then Nicole, if you have anything, is what about the Mark Taylor brand and the impact to it? Because as you were saying, you're on one website, everything was driving there, and I hear so many companies wanting to go this approach to where it's like it's our brand and blah blah blah. So, what was the impact there?
The impact for Mark Taylor's brand when we had these additional websites, I don't remember thinking that there was an impact to it, honestly. It felt like two very separate entities. Like this was the Mark Taylor brand and we were spending money on Mark Taylor's keywords, but also on the sister child websites of those for the actual properties. And it was just very different strategies in place. We did have to be very strategic on those strategies and not bidding against each other and things like that, which was challenging at first to really understand like how do we do this. I didn't know how to do it, and at the time we were working with G5 and they didn't know how to do it, to be honest, and so there was a lot of strategy interventions happening to make sure that we were doing it the right way. But I didn't see any dips in the Mark Taylor website. I truly felt like the new websites just for the properties truly did just replace what the ILSs were doing. It did take time though, obviously, to get all of that ramped up and running, that I was afraid that because it does take time that there would be such a dip, but we really just didn't see it. You were still able to find them, but it definitely got better and better and better as we had more time for SEO, more time for paid to work. Like we just had more time. And I think we also had a challenge though, to be very transparent, is on the GBP page, we were usually linking to Mark Taylor's like the child website of that, and we had a lot of people asking to then switch to this one, and that did kind of hurt our SEO for Mark Taylor. And so that was a challenge of like, do we fight this battle? Do we just do it for those that ask? But I mean, there was some challenges there of like people then definitely like held on to their own website versus necessarily wanting to do as much on the Mark Taylor. So.
Well, Nicole, any final thoughts?
I don't think so. This was great. I feel like we have some really good, like actionable, steps. If you're going to do it, take into consideration seasonality, ownership group, segmentation, monitor the before and after performance, really create like a successful almost trial so you can go and like broadcast and pitch it internally as well as externally. And I think coming up with those talk tracks is probably so important. So I thought this was really great.
That was an amazing recap.
Oh, she's so good at recaps. I'm so impressed.
Solid. It's like you should do this more.
Time.
All right.
Yeah, you can sit in the corner and then come on at the end and say, here's a recap.
Come
like the
recap.
podcast we listen to, you can say, producer Nicole, can you give me your thoughts?
Exactly. That's what I want.
Honestly, you'd be so great at that.
Yeah.
Anything else, Careena, that you didn't share? Or
No, this is great. Thanks for letting me come on and talk and be here with you guys. I had a great time.
This was fun.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.